Thank you for spending your evening with us. It's so gorgeous outside. It was so nice to see everybody walking and running, and it was great to be able to see everybody enjoying the day. But we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. I've been with the city for 5 years. My name is Jessica Vonashek, and I'm the mayor's chief of economic and community development. And I don't think that we've really done something like this before. I think that we've been getting a lot of questions about enforcement, and talking through how we're handling enforcement here at the city. But this is a really great forum for us to be able to talk a little bit about the processes that we have, but also to hear from you as residents of the city of Norwalk, what your concerns are, what the challenges are, and be able to talk with us about making improvements to what we're doing here. So I really welcome this. We've talked for a long time about having this, and I'm really glad that we were able to get it on the calendar for this evening. I'm going to introduce Mayor Rilling and have him say a few opening remarks at the meeting, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess, and welcome everybody. This is a very interesting session, and we think you'll find it very informative. There are a lot of questions about the enforcement efforts and the inspections that the city of Norwalk conducts in any given year. I think you'll be impressed with the number of inspections that are actually conducted, whether it be the fire department, police department, code enforcement, planning and zoning, health department. Every one of them have inspection and enforcement obligations. So for instance, planning and zoning, if you find a house if they find a house, or if the fire department goes in and finds a two-family house, or a three-family house is actually four-family, a lot of people think that we might be able to tax it as a four-family house. Well, that's not the case. In fact, what we most likely have to do is relocate the tenants that we're evicting in a way. And I talked to our health department just before this. The cost of the city of Norwalk right now of relocating some people that had to be removed from multifamily houses that were not in compliance, somewhere in the area of $100,000. So those are the things, the requirements that we have. Now, when a violation is found, that's not the end of the story. There's due process rights that the people have. They have appeal rights, they can have a hearing. And so before any fine is imposed, sometimes those things take quite a bit of time. And I think people get frustrated. We're just talking about a case today that there's several violations, and it's been ongoing for quite some time, but it goes on and on while the people might have due process rights. So I think you'll find up here today the experts, and then after there's a question and answer time after the presentation, we have people situated around the room that can answer your questions one-on-one if you have any questions. So again, I thank you all for being here. It's our opportunity, as Jess said, not only to explain what our process is and how we go about it, but also maybe we can find ways that maybe we can do something a little bit better. And that always helps out, makes things a little bit smoother. So again, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
As the mayor said, we have a three-part agenda, but before we get into that, I would really like for our panel and our city staff to introduce themselves. Everyone is gonna have to listen to me chat for a few minutes about just an overview of the city. But these are really the subject matter experts, and it's important that you all get to know them by name and by face. And so we'll take a few minutes to do introductions.
Jessica. My name is Paul Sotnick. I'm one of the senior civil engineers with the Department of Public Works. My name is Paul Sotnick. I'm one of the senior civil engineers with the Department of Public Works, and one of the areas that I handle is fill and excavation permits. And I'll hand off to another person in Public Works.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Wilbur Duran. I'm the permit engineer for DPW, and I oversee permits that we issue for any work happening in the city's right-of-way. So I'll be speaking about some violations that we oversee related to the city's right-of-way and city property.
Good evening, Steve Kleppen, Planning and Zoning Director for the city. Bill Ireland, Chief Building Official, and oversee Blight.
Deanna Diamore, I'm the Health Director for the city.
Bill Mooney, Assistant Director of Health for Environmental Health. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Jack Kelly, Deputy Fire Marshal with the Fire Department.
Good evening, Lieutenant Topper Gorski with the Norwalk Police Department. I oversee our Community Police Services Division.
Sergeant Ryan Everts with the Police Department, Community Services.
Great, thank you very much. So this evening, as the mayor said, we've split it into 3 different sections. The first is the city presentation, where we're going to go through what our processes are and explain what each of the departments oversees, so you have a better idea. We're going to talk a little bit about state statutes and the regulations that we need to follow when we talk about zoning violations and blight violations and some of the other citations that we have to issue. The second part is a Q&A, and we're going to keep that specific to process questions and even comments about what the process is and recommendations about what the process is. So we're not looking to call out properties or people by name in this particular section. We want to keep it process oriented. And third, we're going to be doing a little bit of a breakout session. So there are tables at the back of the room, and each of the different folks that are here, the city departments, are going to be sitting at each table. And if you have specific challenges or you want to be able to talk about a very specific case or something that's happening in your neighborhood or something that you've seen that you have concerns about, that's really where that conversation can take place. So you can go back and talk to each of the groups and have a conversation one-on-one with those folks. So that's the way that we'll be organizing tonight. You know, one of the things that we've been talking a lot about internally is how to really be responsive to the residents. And, you know, a lot of us all of the residents here live in the city of Norwalk. I know I live in the city of Norwalk, and, you know, we take our kids to school, or we drive to work, or we go to Stop and Shop or ShopRite or wherever you happen to go. And you see certain things, and it could be that, you know, you see it often and you see it always, and it could be that it's just one off, but there's a real passion for the city of Norwalk, and people love the city of Norwalk, and we want it to be beautiful, and we want it to look nice, and we want it to have a certain quality of life, right? And so we've heard from a lot of people about the process for violations and the process for making complaints. And we've heard that in some cases it's confusing, or in some cases a complaint is made and no one really knows where that complaint goes. People are unsure if we've heard what they've said. Sometimes there's a lag in the optics of when you make a complaint and you see something happening and you don't necessarily know why. We've also heard about people wondering what department is responsible for what, and do I call blight, or do I call zoning, or I'm confused, I don't really even know what this is. And to be honest, I don't really care who deals with it as long as somebody deals with it, right? And so, you know, we've also been talking a lot about making changes operationally to the city and the staff, and thinking about how to be responsive to what we're hearing from the community. And so, you know, we really, in culminating in all of our work together and the work in which we do when we meet, we've all been saying, well, I heard this. Well, I heard this. Someone called and asked this. And we'll say, okay, well, they're starting to sound like similar concerns and similar complaints. And so, one, there's an education piece with being able to talk about the state statutes and why we do what we do and how we do what we do. And then there's a piece of the local ordinances that also govern how we do policy here in the city and actions in the city. And so we want to talk to you about those tonight, but we also want to hear what's frustrating, because we have an opportunity to make change, and we have an opportunity to look at ordinances and be able to change those. And we also have a little bit of some obstacles with some of the state statutes that are in place, but at the same time, we just want to work together with you to figure that out. And so we put together a city enforcement hierarchy here. And so this is not a complete city org chart, but all of these departments that you see on this particular org chart are enforcement bodies within the city of Norwalk. And to a large extent, those staff members are actually sitting here on the panel for you to talk to today. And so, you know, we're making improvements, and I'm not going to steal the thunder of all of the people at the table. I'll try not to anyway, but, you know, we've been able to ramp up on staff. We brought on a second blight enforcement officer. We're able to bring on a second zoning enforcement officer. We actually worked with state legislators to rewrite the blight ordinance. There's a bill that's going through the legislature that just went through this session that actually adds language in there that allows us to put homes with a zoning violation on the tax sale. And we've been dealing a lot with the ordinances. We've rewritten the blight ordinance. We've also rewritten the sidewalk ordinance. So we feel internally that we've made improvements. Are you seeing them? I'm not sure. A lot of them are in documents, and a lot of them are, but a lot of those improvements give us the tools to be able to do what we need to do to a greater extent, right? And without the ability to have those tools in place, to a certain extent, we aren't able to exercise some of the things that we can now to be able to do that. And it takes a bit of a runway to get there. And so, we want to also thank you for your patience, because we feel like we've made that change, but it's taken time and there's a lot more that we can be doing. And we know that. And some of those things I've mentioned already, whether they be communicating back that a complaint has come in and that we know it's there, letting you know where that property is in the process, or letting you know if it's going to the tax sale. And we get a lot of repeat questions. There's a lot of things that we've also heard about, just information available in the public realm, right? Can we just go on the city website and just look and see who has the violation and where they are in the process? And so we've heard all of these, we've heard all of this feedback. And so some of these things we still need to work on, but we're all ears. And I'm going to pass it over to Steve Kleppen, Director of Planning and Zoning, to be able to get into the department's responsibilities. But what I did want to say is that as you folks present, you want to come up to the podium because you're actually able to advance the slides from this particular space. Thanks.
Good evening. I have the pleasure of everybody's favorite topic, planning and zoning. We have a few of the team members in the back, Tammy Maldonado, who's a zoning enforcement officer, John Hayducky and Paul, who are zoning inspectors. They are the folks who probably deal with the enforcement issues kind of on a day-to-day basis. So if you have specific questions after the fact, feel free to, ask them about that. They can also walk you through how to put in a complaint. I saw some people snapping pictures of the slides. If you want to just watch, and then I'm happy to work with IT to figure out the best place to put the presentation on the city's website, so you can go back and look at the slides at any point. And the meeting's also being recorded and also on Zoom, so the slides will be available to look at at different times as well. Here's P&Z that we fall into the zoning, I guess the hierarchy piece of enforcement for the city. Kind of two things I put underneath there. One is the Planning and Zoning Commission, and also we have a citation hearing officer. The Planning and Zoning Commission has some enforcement powers. If there's an application or an application that was approved and they're not adhering to those conditions, the commission has the ability to revoke that approval. We've gotten close to doing that a couple of different times with a couple of contractor yards in South Norwalk when they were going beyond the limits and scope of what they were permitted. And the hearing officer is a volunteer position appointed by the mayor, who acts completely independently of staff and follows statutory obligations and is part of the process. Here's the internal staff hierarchy. As I mentioned, the folks that are here in the back. We also have two folks that their position title is land use technician. Their really primary function is doing inspections and permitting, but they do go out and make those initial inspections. If we get a complaint about an illegal contractor yard, an illegal apartment or something, they'll go out and see what is happening on the ground, maybe take some pictures if what's available is visible from the public right. So we get our authority from a couple different places. The general statutes, there are several sections that give basic zoning enabling legislation. And there's also a couple of statutory sections that talk about the enforcement process and what we can do and what we can't do. We also have the city code that talks about what the citation process is. And, what most people deal with, or what most people are familiar with, are the actual zoning regulations themselves, which dictate what you can or can't do on a property, the extent and scope of what that can be, and the bounds and rules and regulations surrounding it. So within that hierarchy, there are a lot of different types of zoning violations. The ones that we put our primary focus on, because I think they're the most impactful in terms of what they do to neighborhoods or neighboring properties, but also can be life safety issues. So illegal apartments are always a hot topic. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Contractor yards are also a hot topic as well. And I put in parentheses legal and illegal. So you have obviously ones that are illegal where they pop up where they're not supposed to be. And there are also some that are legal, or which we're saying they're permitted to be there, but they're not operating with the bounds of their permit. So an example of that might be they have piles of material that can't be more than 20 feet high, for example. And they're supposed to be covered with tarps, or they're supposed to wet those down to make sure there's not dust, but they aren't putting the tarps on, or the piles are 30 feet high. So those would be examples of when they're not abiding by what the rules for their properties are. Motor vehicle repair is also a very common issue that is very impactful for the neighborhood, because if someone's operating an illegal garage out of their property, there's noise, there's concerns related to, additional traffic in the neighborhood, safety issues. There's all kinds of concerns around that, as well as commercial businesses. And we get a lot of complaints about parking of different types of vehicles in the wrong locations, whether those are commercial, they can be boats, they can be large trucks, RVs. There's rules around where those can be located and what types of properties and where on those properties. And, we find the gambit of those that either comply or they don't comply. Other common complaints we get are related to signs. Parking in the front yard is a very common one, especially in the smaller lots and the tighter areas. Grading and excavation when there's construction going on in your neighbor's property and they're not abiding by the rules. Or unregistered vehicles is a pretty common one. And there's some overlap with some of the other departments on many of these items as well. So just some rough numbers on what we see in terms of volume. We get average about 1 complaint a day. So that's a pretty significant volume. About a quarter of those aren't actually zoning violations, but each one of those, whether they're a violation or not, creates work for our staff. So, some of them, when they come in, their complaints, we can say right away, well, this is not zoning violation, just based on the description of what they did. And we can say, no, there's no violation at all, or we refer it to another department to follow up with. But a lot of times we have to go out and at least look at what they're saying is going on there. Whether it's they're saying there's a, dump truck parked on my neighbor's property, it's been there for 6 months. We say, okay, we'll go out and look and verify what's there. Then there's several steps about logging in that complaint. You have to take pictures, notices are generated from that, et cetera. Of that balance of the ones that, we confirm are violations, about half of those, maybe a little more than half of those, get resolved either by themselves or working with city staff. So we'll send a notice out to say, hey, you've got to move this truck. It's not supposed to be there. We'll give you 15 days to move it. They'll hopefully, if they're, cooperative, they'll contact the staff person that wrote the letter. They'll work to resolve that. And they say, mate, I need another week. So we'll say, okay, as long as it's gone by the end of the month, there'll be no further action. And then we follow up with inspections from there. About 20% of the confirmed violations are referred to our citation hearing officer. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that process. And then there's about 20% of the ones that we just can't resolve because they can be items that we cannot see. And 2 ones in particular that I know are very frustrating for residents are complaints about excessive occupancy or illegal apartments. So when those occur in 1 or 2 family houses, I don't have any police powers to go on anybody's property. I can go and knock on the door and say, excuse me, ma'am, I'm Steve Cluckman with the city of Norwalk. I have a complaint about activity going on in your property. Can we talk about it? Or can I take a look? If they tell me to leave, I have to leave. At that point, I'm trespassing on their property. We can, if we have suspicion that there is definitely something going on there, we can try to go through the state prosecutor's office and get an administrative warrant. Our luck with that has been slim to none, because usually what happens is a judge will want to say, well, what's your proof that there's actually something going on there? And we can say, well, there's 15 cars and 6 satellite dishes, and we see people coming and going at all hours. And the judge is going to say, that's not proof of anything. So the only thing that is concrete proof is getting inside and looking at that. Or what 2 other effective ways are, we can sometimes get lucky and they'll advertise. So sometimes people even advertise illegal apartments on Facebook, and you can say, well, we know from our records and permitting that there's only 2 units supposed to be in this house. you're advertising a third, we know that's not legal, then we can kind of pinch them there. Sometimes we get affidavits from somebody that's actually gone in and looked at it as a potential tenant. So that's an avenue. Some municipalities have actually gone a step further where they'll hire a private investigator to pose as a suspected tenant, and they can get inside and document everything they've seen and provide that documentation. But that's not efficient when you have a large volume, and it's an expensive cost that, you know, something that has to factor into the city's decision making. I'm going to talk a little bit about this in a couple different stages, but one major problem, this sounds like a really silly thing. Previously, we had like 4 separate avenues where folks could lodge a complaint. And they could do it through our website, they could do it through the city's website. There was also, you know, you could write an email. We try to consolidate everything down into the other process the city's using, which is click and request, which you can get at through the city's homepage. And the big advantage of that is now I kind of know what's coming in for complaints because it's all cataloged in one place. And then I can go into a separate software where all the documentation is and actually see the status. Where before, someone would email me like, hey, I called 3 times about this property, we complained 4 times. I have no knowledge of it, but now I have at least a way to track it. So that's a step in the right direction. We're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing on the software improvement end to streamline it even more, but we're actually starting to make some positive steps in that direction. So if we get a complaint, first thing we do is log that into the software so we know that there's been a complaint. Then we'll either go out and take a look, and most of the time we do go out and take a look, even if it's an illegal apartment, to see if there's some telltale signs that there might be something going on. If we can't see anything and there's an illegal apartment suspected, we'll send out an inspection request, basically asking the property owner, hey, we got this request, we'd like to come inside and take a look. They're under zero obligation to let us onto their property, but we do go through those steps. If a violation is confirmed, so we go out and say, my neighbor's parking 6 contractor vehicles on his property. That's pretty easy. If you can see it from the street, great. Sometimes we can get access from a neighbor's property if they're willing to let us on. But if we can confirm that the violation is present, we send a violation notice out to that person saying, hey, we observed this and that. You have 15 days or so to correct this violation. If not, we'll take the next step where we actually sent a citation out. And then it goes through a separate process where there's a citation hearing officer. And that individual, as I mentioned, is a volunteer who acts in the capacity of did the city go through the right steps? Is there a violation present on the property? And then he'll usually uphold our decision that there is a violation present. And then he has the ability to impose fines, which statutorily is up to $150 a day at maximum. The idea is really important to note is that we're trying to gain compliance, not collect fees. I know that process, we even as staff sometimes get frustrated by the length of time some of these specific complaints are in the system. We're working as much as we can to streamline that. If no violation is, oh, sorry, I skipped kind of an important thing that Jessica hit on earlier is that there is some new legislation we're hoping gets signed by the governor where we'll be able to put some of these chronic properties on the tax sale. And what that will do is we'll either force them to pay the liens, or if they don't do that, then the ability to foreclose the property exists. To date, we've placed about $155,000 worth of liens on properties, and there's additional ones that are in the citation process that will get liens levied at some point in time, but that's what we've done to date. If we go out and someone says, well, this one is a real common occurrence, and we had one in South Norwalk recently where they were complaining about a painting contractor was parking vehicles on the property. I know myself on this particular property, I went out after several night meetings at 11 o'clock at night, witnessed nothing. Had staff out there at 7 in the morning, witnessed nothing. Had staff on the weekends, witnessed nothing. After a certain point in time, I can't keep dedicating staff to go out looking at the same thing if nothing's going on. So we close those out, and we may get a repeat complaint about that, and again, we do close those out. If we have a suspicion of a violation, or we send out a notice and we get no response, and there's nothing we can do to get inside the property to verify that there is a complaint, we do note that. Sometimes we will put notices on the land records. So the idea is, at least if we know there's a suspicion, if they come in a year from now and they want to build a deck on their property and we get a flag in our system saying potential violation of a legal apartment, we will not issue that permit until we can verify that there is no violation. One way we do get, maybe sometimes our best enforcement is when someone's trying to sell their house and the title search companies wants to know, is there any issues on this property? And we'll have a note in our system saying, note of an illegal apartment. We will hold up that sale on that property until we can verify that there are no issues on it. Some kind of recent changes that we've gone through and just hit on some of these. We do have a second citation hearing officer. We actually had our first hearing with the new citation hearing officer yesterday. Ian Hall is in the back, is our second deputy zoning inspector. That is a new position that became effective within the last 6 months. Unfortunately, Ian was in another position, so we have to backfill his spot, but we do have Ian now focusing on more of enforcement basis. So the idea is we can pick up the volume of things, because right now, like I mentioned, you get one complaint a day, one person whose main responsibility is dealing with enforcement. It's untenable for that person to keep up with that volume. It just doesn't work. I mentioned the click and request, how we kind of streamlined our reporting capacity. And a very, I think, exciting thing and overdue thing is we're looking at new software where we can not only handle permitting, but also enforcement and inspections. Right now, we don't have a unified software system in the city. We have several different software programs that do different things, but we're hoping to have a unified model where we can handle complaints, inspections, enforcement, permitting, all in one software system that's also public facing. So you can have access to exactly what we see and what we're doing. Because right now, we don't have that ability with any of the software we have. It's just right now, we're not at that stage. So planning and zoning, we're kind of multiple departments. We're planning, we're zoning. We're also inland wetlands. Alexis Carichetti, who is the assistant director of the department, is also the wetlands officer. Some points just to point out for wetlands. They do take anonymous complaints. I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit later. They also utilize click and request. Wetlands permits are required within certain distances of water courses, wetlands, and also, with CAM within natural resources of the state body waters. And just, the common thing, especially as spring comes up, we get a lot of complaints about clear cutting or work going on in the neighbor's property, and there's a pond there, or the wetlands there, and there's a machine now parked in there, and they're digging in there. Why are they doing this? That's a pretty common call that our department receives, and Alexis and her folks kind of jump on that, hop on that. With that, I'm going to be quiet and turn it over to Bill Iyer.
Good evening, everybody. Got to bear with me here a little bit. I'm Bill Ireland, Chief Building Official for the city, also in charge of the blight, oversee the blight, anti-blight, I should say. We don't want to call it blight, anti-blight throughout the city. We get approximately 40 new cases a month. And in that period of time, we usually would cure about 35 of them, but the ones that don't get cured are the ones that become the monsters that I think everyone worries about and complains about the most. Again, we're very similar to what Steve was talking about. We have the general statutes, city ordinances, and Norwalk regulations that govern how we work our office and how we conduct our duties to the city. I'm Bill Ireland, as I said. The blight team, Stephen Bruschi, he's a neighborhood improvement manager, and we just finished interviewing for the two positions for the blight enforcement officers that you see above. They have not been announced yet. This is a small example of what the blighted properties for residences and commercial, public right-of-ways with sidewalks, uncut lawns, unmanaged vegetation in the front and side, peeling paints on the house. falling trees, fences, garbage in the front or side yards, boarded windows and or doors. And everything we see must be visible. Again, must be visible from the sidewalk or the driveway. We're not allowed to walk up the driveway. We're not allowed to go take a look over a fence, because those are all privacy issues dictated by the state of Connecticut. So we're not allowed to do that as of now. We have sign removal. You see the signs on the poles for, excuse me, for the tag sales or state sales or whatever. Or get your driveway paved or sealed, or election signs, or tents on the sidewalks and in the amenity zone. These are all picked up and put us away, or we'll notify the store owner to take it in. If it's there when we go by a second time, we'll take it away and discard it. Graffiti removal is big throughout the city. You can see some of the examples here where it's on city property. We can't do anything on private property, but it's dealt with accordingly. Once a week, everybody goes around, does their reports, and then takes the graffiti and either power washes it off or repaints the property like you see there on the right, underneath the throughway bridge is that one there. We have illegal dumping and neighborhood cleanups. This is priority items. We have in the blight enforcement areas, partnerships with Star and Keep Norwalk Beautiful. As you can see, to the photo to the left, that I believe was in South Norwalk. I forget the location, but we did get it cleaned up. We did go through the dumpings of there, and we found out some bills that happened to be in the garbage, and we went to the person who created the mess, and we did collect, besides them fixing it, we did collect the fine, and it's been kept well ever since. They haven't gone back. Most of the neighborhood cleanups were with volunteers. In 2023, 27 volunteers collected 800 pounds of litter and debris. 2022, 4 neighborhood cleanups, 96 volunteers collected 1,775 pounds of litter and debris. Priority items, removal of leaf bags and yard waste. In other words, when people put their leaf bags out there and they're out there too soon or too long, they break apart. We go after them to clean it up, either get it picked up and taken away. We also notify them when the lawn cleanups are throughout the city, and in the back table there, we do have some of the times and dates and maps for it. And if they don't do it, we pick it up and they'll be fined accordingly. Well, okay, here's what happens when we do it. We get a complaint for blight, and it has to go through a process. The process is being investigated. Right now, we have one person that investigates and takes the photos, brings back the information that he has, or she would bring back the information. We then would inform the owner, the property owner, of the violation that he would have on his property. It's determined by us if it's an existing condition, how long it would be allowed to stay. Even if it also gets into as far as what a hearing officer would dictate to us, what the cleanup would be. So he receives a letter, or she would receive, the property owner would receive a letter. And a lot of times the property owner is not even in town, but they're renting the property and they feel it's the responsibility of the tenant. No, it's the responsibility of the owner. Even when the property gets, people move out at the end of the month and they put their furniture on the street, responsibility of the owner. They're the ones that keep the property clean. They own the house, they collect the rent, they have the security. It's up to them to clean the property properly. And they're notified. And if they don't, and we have to do it, they'll be charged accordingly. When we have our hearings, and it's done once a month, and we have an independent hearing officer, which has been appointed by the city law department. In our hearings, he is acting as the judge. It's an attorney acting as a judge. He hears the case, it's presented, and this is after the trail of letters that go out. Warning is the first, and that gives you your violation. You have 15 days from a date we give you to have it cleaned up. We will revisit the property. If it's not, then it becomes a citation letter. And there's amount of time involved with that, 45 days to clean up. And if it's not done, then you get a failure to pay because the fine accumulates once you get the citation. Or you're allowed to come in for a hearing or request one earlier than what the citation letter dictates. So you're allowed a hearing. That's the homeowner's right. If he gets the first letter, he can get a hearing and explain his problems. And there are problems. A lot of people are too elderly, physically incapable of doing it. And that's has to be taken into consideration by the hearing officer, because we don't make that decision, he does. We present the case, the owner will present their case, and we see where it goes from there. The hearing officer then will dictate a time and a fine. So he may say, as an example, okay, you have, we've given you time, but you haven't done it. You've pleaded your case. We're going to give you another 30 days, maybe 60 days. And if it's not done, the fine becomes retroactive. It becomes retroactive, then we file the paperwork to put a judgment lien on the property. We cannot collect 5 cents without a judgment lien in our case. It goes to the court. That takes about another 30 days, I believe, to get approved. And then once that happens, we can put it on the tax sales, which there are multiple properties we have on there, excuse me, for the next sale coming up. To date, we've collected $537,000. The liens on the properties we have now for the tax sale in September is over $300,000. So they either remedy the situation and pay the fine, or it goes into the tax sale. The person who purchased that property in the sale, I believe, has 6 months to have the owner redeem it from him or her. If they don't, we have a new owner. The blight does not go away because we have a new owner. They have 30 days to remedy. And if not, they get blighted. But we have to go through the whole process over again. It's not boom, boom, boom. A new blight on a property. We could be in the middle of having blight on a property and they're doing something. A new blight starts the process all over again. They're all protected by law, everybody. And that's what really makes it drag out. We have one episode that took place a few years ago that took 2 years for us to get permission to correct the property by the courts. So it's nothing that we can do overnight. It's frustrating, I know, for the neighbors, people around the property, people seeing this. It's just as frustrating for us. Just as frustrating. And I know I hear from my wife because she drives around and gives me all the reports. So I get it day and night. Let's put it that way. But we understand what you're going through, and I hope you understand what we're trying to go through to make these things correct. We are getting great, I think, results. But again, we have the stubborn ones. We have the $150 a day fine for the properties that are not vacant. And we have a vacant property fine of, excuse me, $250. And usually that's a bank or somebody who just abandoned the property. So that an abandoned property and a vacant property are two different things because somebody still owns it, and that would be the bank. So that's where all this would turn into. And then we have the $1,000 a day, the multiple violations on the property, same property in a period of a year. Goes to $1,000 a day. We try and enforce it the best we can. We take the complaints, we get on them as quick as we can. I know it's hard to keep everybody happy, but I hate to say it in those rough way that that's the way it is, but that's the way it is. We try to follow up with every complainant. If we have their email, a lot of them come in anonymous, and if they do, there's no way to get back to them, and then they get upset because we haven't gotten back to them. But 9 out of 10 times, it's the problem of the person who complained. I just explained about the final notice and housing court and the hearings that take place with the compliance. And we have the closure, the notes. I mean, just to go through the whole thing, complaint received, investigation, notice of violation, follow up. That's everything I went over with you. And we have the new, a recent hire of an improvement manager. He works with the blight officers who are about to be hired. I usually oversee that department besides the building department. Which recent changes to the blight statute has really helped us a lot. Gave us more power to find the people out there to do what we have to do. We're trying to streamline the complaint reporting, as Steve was explaining before. And the software upgrades, as Steve was explaining before, are all in the hands of IT. So that's all I have to say about that. I hope I explained it well enough. And talk to you. I'll be at the table back there later. And if you have any questions, we can go over it there. Okay? Thank you.
I think you're probably hearing a common theme at this point, which is that we notify through certified mail and then we wait 15 days and then we make sure that the certified mail was delivered and that it was received. And then we wait for another 45 days and then we wait for another 15 days. And those, I just think it's really important for all of us to understand that we at the city level do not decide how many days those days are, right? Like what each phase is. That's actually the state statute that requires us to wait a certain amount of time or to do a certain number of things before we actually get to the next checkpoint, right? And so I think you can hear just even from the tone of Bill in talking about this, that it gets really, it's frustrating on our end because we are receiving these complaints and we're driving and we're looking at our neighborhoods and our communities that we live in and we're seeing the same thing, right? And to a certain extent, we feel like we have a lot of tools in place and even more now with some of the improvements that you've seen that we're talking about. But there's a little bit of this position that we're in that we wish we could just do something now and do something quickly, right? Because for us, in addition to that, when we get 40 complaints a month, we may close out those 35 complaints, but they're not the same complaints. The ones that come in aren't the same ones that get closed. And so, you know, we were on emails earlier today, even where if you look at a property, you see that it's been on the tax sale for the last 2 or 3 tax sales, right? And so we need to go through this process each and every time, and that's required by those state statutes. Now, we have been able to change some of the language in those statutes with help from the legislators, and we'll continue to do that. But I wanted to just make a note that those aren't numbers and those aren't time periods that we at the local level make up. Those are sort of told to us and we follow those as part of the process. So thanks, Bill, for doing that. And just gonna hand it over to Deanna from the Health Department.
Thanks, Jess. So public health officials are empowered and granted the authority to preserve and improve public health and to prevent the spread of disease. Our authority comes from multiple sources, including state laws and regulations, as well as local laws. We're responsible for enforcing different sections of the Connecticut general statutes, just like many of our partners are. Also provisions of the Connecticut Public Health Code, as well as we're involved in many different chapters within the Norwalk Code of Ordinances. And for enforcement, our overall goal is to create healthier communities and promote a safe and healthy environment. So we actually fall within the Community Services Department in the city. So Lamondanos is our Chief of Community Services, and we're with Health Human Services and the library. This is a general, overall organizational chart for the health department, and we want to highlight the entities and staff that are involved in environmental enforcement. So, public health authority is generally granted by statute and local code of ordinances to the health director. And then our environmental health staff, which are highlighted here, they're the ones that act as agents of the health director, and they're led by Bill Mooney, who's sitting at the table. He's our Assistant Director of Health. And, he's going to tell you more about our team, but we also have Sean Duffy and Kyle Bader, who are in our back, a sanitarian and housing inspector. They're available for questions and to talk to afterwards. I also just want to highlight the Board of Health because they also have a role in enforcement. Examples of their work include developing and passing local regulations once that is enabled by ordinances that are passed by the Common Council. They also help establish our fees for our different licenses and permits. And they also have the ability to suspend licenses for certain types of establishments, such as massage establishments. And they also can hold hearings with some types of permit holders and render decisions if some are appealing something that has been decided by the health department, like indoor tanning facilities. So I'm going to pass it on to Bill now to talk more about the work.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Bill Mooney with the Health Department. So I have under my staff, I have two sanitarians and one health inspector. They do a lot of the environmental work. I also have three housing inspectors that go out and do obviously the housing issues. I also have one person who does weights and measures, so they're overseeing, the gas stations, taxis, scales when you go into the delis, that type of thing. And I have a part-time person that helps me with relocation and evictions. I'll kind of touch on those in just a second, but that's the staff that we have right now. As far as what the sanitarians do or the environmental staff, so we'll do the food establishments. That includes also farmers markets, temporary events, and the itinerant vendors, the food trucks. So they'll do that. We have about over 600 restaurants alone. So and we have to do some of them as much as 3 times a year at this point, and several of them 4 times a year. We also have body care facilities that fall under like the massage, even though it's over here massage and tanning, but the hair salons, the nail salons, and the barber shops. So we're also doing that. They're also responsible for the subsurface sewage. So if you have a septic system, if there's a failure, we'll go out and we have to make sure that there's soil testing done, that it's sized properly and it's proper separation distance, that type of thing. But some of the other things that go along with that are that we have, if you're gonna do anything to your house where you're going to increase the design for add a bedroom, expand the footprint, add a pool or something like that, it's also gonna trigger some of the things that we do where we have to go out and assess if you don't have a reserve area to do some things, you're gonna have to do that, which requires soil testing or perk tests. So we do a number of those things around that. Where the sanitarians also do swimming pools. We have about 20 that we do regularly that are indoor pools. And then during the summer, we have upwards of 60. We have the condo pools open up. And we started doing those as well. So we have about 60 a year that we have to do. Itinerant vending I mentioned, it falls under food establishment, massage and tanning establishment. We also do tattoo in there too. So they fall under kind of the body care umbrella. We do daycares also. They're really licensed by the state Office of Early Childhood Education, but we're required to go in when they're new and every other year do an inspection. It's mostly the physical plant that we're looking at. We don't do any of the educational programs, the nursing sort of stuff. That's paperwork that's done by OEC. But we do go in and do that. If it's a new daycare, we have to ensure that they've had a lead inspection done, that they're required to have to do that. And if they're going to expand any services, expand the facility somehow, we have to make sure they have a lead inspection there as well. Let's see, what else are we doing here? So the lead paint, the noise, and public health nuisance stuff kind of falls under both housing and the sanitarians. Depends on what the issue is. Within the housing, we do all the complaints regarding everything from bed bugs to hoarding, illegal apartments, that type of thing. We go in and do all of that kind of stuff. We also do inspect rooming houses. We have about 35 rooming houses that we do every year. And we also do the certificate of apartment occupancy. So in other words, the tenement house has to be older than 10 years old, the big apartment. So whenever it's really incumbent on the owner to call us, but if they're having somebody moving out, they're going to do the work. We'll go in and do an inspection so that when that person, when they sell or they rent it out, that we've been in there to say, this has got to be done first, and so that it protects both the owner and the tenant. So that we said, look, this is the way it was when you moved in, and it covers everybody. And also, gets ahead of any safety issues that might occur. So I'm trying to think what else. And again, with the lead paint, we do lead inspections. We get a few of those a year. We're going to start getting more because the levels, blood lead levels is going down significantly. It used to be 20 micrograms per deciliter would trigger a lead abatement inspection for a lead poisoning child. Right now it's at 10 micrograms. They've stepped it down. It was 15 last year. It's 10 this year. Next year it's going to be 5 micrograms. So we're expecting a big increase in that, where we have to go out and do full scale inspections, which requires a complete inspection of the property, of the house itself, both inside and out, with an instrument that measures lead and paint. We have to do water sampling, soil sampling, dust wipes, and it's it's a pretty involved process. I have right now, 7 people that are certified in lead inspection, so I think we're in pretty good shape with that coming up, that we can handle what we need to. We have 1 unit, that 1 instrument, but I think we can get by with that, with the folks that we have. Again, weights and measures, I kind of mentioned, we have 1 person who does that. They're just making sure that, you know, if you pay for a gallon of gasoline, it's a gallon of gasoline. You know, if you're paying for something on a scale, you're getting whatever the weight is, so it's properly done. And the last thing that we do is water quality. So typically during this time of year, we start with water sampling for all the beaches. We have 15 beach locations throughout the city that we sample. It's about 25 samples per week. We do at least once a week. So we go out every Monday. It takes about 2.5 hours to get all the samples and we run up to the state health department lab. If there's any failures, we got to go back on Wednesday and redo it. And if there's any failures, then we may have to close the use depending on what's going on. We'll also do sometimes water sampling if there's another issue that we suspect maybe there's a septic system broken someplace. We'll do dye testing, we'll do water testing in surrounding areas, try and establish if there's something going on. And I think that covers most of what we do. So, yeah. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I'll just add that, you know, because public health is so broad, we often get many different types of complaints and we work with so many different departments and agencies to address. And so whether it's us to address it or whether we refer outside or, you know, so we work really closely with everyone here, various other departments in the city, as well as, you know, the State Department of Public Health and State Department of Environmental and, you know, Energy and Environmental Protection and others, consumer protection.
And there's one other thing, so I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this. So if we, sometimes we get housing complaints regarding, well, we go in as an illegal apartment of some sort. It doesn't require us to relocate somebody right away. It depends on whether there's safety issues. If there's no safety issues, then we'll give them 30 days or 45 days for the family to move out. If we go in though, and there are safety issues, we'll move them out that night. We'll put them up in a hotel. And it's incumbent upon the owner, it really falls on the owner to pay for that, but often they'll pay for about a week and then they realize what the costs are and then they don't want to do it anymore. But what we can do is we can lien the property. So we'll continue to pay. And so we find them either if it's something where they can move back in quickly, for instance, if there's a heat or a hot water issue and it can be fixed in a couple of days, then they can move back in. If it's something like a fire or it's an illegal apartment where it's totally unsafe, then we'll put them up until we can find them another place. And that's under the Uniform Relocation Assistance Act. We're required to do that. We have to put them up. We have to help them find a place to live. And we usually have to start off where it's in the same area with their same rental, whatever their income is based on the rent and the school district and try and keep them in there. But at times we do have to expand because the housing market is really expensive. It's really hard for people to find another place often. But we can't put anybody on the street. We never will. So that's important to know. We do work really hard to get them moved on. And they're required to you know, work with us to do that. But it's something that we do quite a bit. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah. Okay, so for our enforcement part, we get the complaint and I always want the staff, so people come in, you can either fall in, people walk in, we'll send stuff through customer service, which happens quite often. As soon as we get a complaint, our staff will at least reach out to either the person who's complaining if they'll let us in or the owner within 2 days to start basically an inspection to get out there and see what's going on. If something is found to be, you know, out of compliance, we'll send a notice of violation. The amount of time that requires to do that is kind of depending on what the issues are and how severe they are. Again, if it's life-threatening, we move them out right away. And then it could be something where it's 30 days. If it's somebody we're going to try and it's illegal, we're going to move on. If it's a lot of times we'll even go beyond that. As soon as we go out to the exploiting issues, we're trying to be compassionate because there's a mental health component to this. And so we're trying to work with the individual to try and get cleaned up. But honestly, it can take a long time. It can take over a year sometimes. And unfortunately what happens is we get it cleaned up and then it kind of reverts back again. But we do attempt to do that. We show a lot of compassion in that regard because it's not really their fault. There's often an issue with mental health there. So we'll do that. And then the follow-up is we're always in communication with the owners to make sure that things are getting done. We do a reinspection. If it's found to be in compliance, then we'll close the case. If we get something where the tenant or the owner rather is not complying, then we'll send them what's called a final notice, gives them 7 days to get back to us. If they don't get back to us, then we will go ahead and refer them to the housing court. That's usually when they get a call from the state's attorney's office. That's usually when they actually will comply with, or at least calls. So that's the process. And sometimes it takes a long time. When we do a notice of violation, we have to send out a certified letter. We often don't get those green cards back to notify that they've received it for sometimes well over a month, sometimes even a month and a half. So that kind of slows the process down, unfortunately. But that's how we do the process. And once we go back in and found everything to be compliant, we close the case, and then that's really about it at that point. And to contact us, you can always call the phone. There's our number there. There's our staff directory. You can go to that and call, or just go right and email us. I tell people you can always, we're always open at Health Break. You can always walk in, but we're not always there because the staff are out in the field a lot. So I say call first and then ask for either a sanitarian or a housing inspector, depending on what the issue is. And then try and get an appointment that way instead of walking in. And then customer service, we also get quite a few when they come. We probably get maybe 2 or 3 a week to customer service about various complaints. And, so that's the system. Okay, all right. Sorry, thanks. Yeah, not too smooth, but anyway.
Know your stuff though, Bill. So just wanted to comment on something that Deanna had just spoken about, which is still answering the question of who do I call if I see something, because I can't still tell if it's zoning or if it's blight or if it's health or if it's police or fire marshal. And what I wanted to let you know is that we all meet every 5 or 6 weeks to talk about every single property that has a violation on it or a citation or a lien. And we go through and do a roundtable and talk about where we're at with that particular property. And we do that with the legal department at the table to be able to have a conversation with us to make sure that we're navigating the right path, but also that if we see an issue, whether it be a mental health issue or an issue that isn't being addressed because someone's spouse has died or there's a financial challenge or a physical challenge in the household, that we at the table have the ability to think of how to use resources in a creative way to be able to help whoever is having the challenge, right? And so Bill mentioned that we have $554,000 in the blight fund, which is funds that we've collected through folks that have had blight funds fines through over the last number of years. And those resources can be used to help those folks that are in homes that have actually been blighted or in businesses that have been blighted. So if there is someone who is incapable for whatever reason of fixing the porch or the front door or the fence that's falling down, we have the ability to go in and actually work with the property owner to put funds down to be able to make that improvement. And that requires a lien on their house so that when they sell their house, we get those funds back into the blight fund, right? So, but I'm saying that because when you see something, you should just call and say something about it, because even if zoning goes and does an inspection, if it's a health issue or a blight issue, the first thing we'll do is pick up the phone and call the department ourselves, who we think is responsible for that. And in many cases, what ends up happening is 3 or 4 of us from 3 or 4 different departments will actually meet at the same time with the property owner to be able to go through the list of violations so that the property owner knows that we're all talking to one another and that we all know from a department standpoint what the other departments are telling the property owner, and that the property owner knows what level of resources are available for us to be able to help them get where they need to be on some of those properties. And I'll leave it at that. Jack Kelly, come on up. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jack Kelly. I'm a deputy fire marshal with the fire department. I'm also the community program, community outreach program man. So I do a lot of education. Our division works very proactively. We're out every day inspecting commercial and residential. Our staff consists of the following personnel here. We have 7 full-time inspectors and 2 part-time inspectors, both of which are retired firefighters from Stanford and very experienced. They do a great job of helping us keep up with the number of inspections that are required by law. We fall under, obviously under the fire department. We work directly with the chief of operations, chief of facilities. And we are. We work under direct orders from Connecticut General Statutes 29.305. And what that means is we are required to inspect the following occupancies and so it's 3 family dwellings. 3 family dwellings and up are all considered apartment buildings. But obviously in Norwalk here, we have legitimate apartment buildings going up. They all fall under the same fire code obligation. With residential board and care facilities, star facilities, things like that. And then their lodging. We inspect these annually every year. And our main goal is fire code compliance. Our mission statement is dedicated to saving lives and property, fire code compliance, and fire prevention education. Our main goal is life safety. Our main mission is to make sure that everyone can get out of dwelling or occupancy during the fire and make sure all the required systems are in place. So the main issues that we deal with on a regular basis is finding illegal apartments because we are out there proactively. So we've seen a major uptick since the pandemic. Financial issues, housing issues. A lot of people family members in, created attic space, basement spaces, apartments that do not have a viable way out. So that is our main impetus to find, when we find illegal apartments, we find insufficient block egress or exits, that's a hard stop. There's no 30-day notice on that. The homeowner, the property owner is notified immediately. State fire marshal is notified immediately. And if the problem can be fixed in 4 hours, we won't have to do it. But majority of times in attics and basements, there's structural modifications that would require obviously a lot more than 4 hours. So we have the ability to immediately institute what we have to do to make sure. Another one that we run into a lot of times is failure to maintain or shutting off fire protection. What that means is sprinklers and fire pits. Right. So apartment buildings, 4 stories or higher, fire have sprinklers, and every residential 3-family or up with the fire has fire pits. Missing, inadequate, have the ability to have them make them. We work very closely with partner agencies represented here, public health, planning and zoning, building enforcement. We take a collaborative approach a lot of times. We have a lot of crossover in our teams sometimes. Fire code doesn't apply to planning and zoning, vice versa, and we can really, come together and have a uniform approach. So based on that, we have a team-based approach. Some varying codes across all. So when we collaborate, we're able to make sure that nothing's really the goal. To make sure nothing is. If there is a weather vacate issue, state fire line will notify. There is that 4-hour window to be adjusted. If you can't do that, then we'll talk with health, Relocation Act, and get those folks. And then, if it's, we give them, work with the homeowner, property owner, come up with a viable, date for inspection, right? So it's fire codes are, 30, we typically get 30. Right, 30 days to go back out. And if when we make, again, because there is a lot of code crossover, when the fire code violations are abated or remedied, that doesn't absolve the other issues that planning and zoning and building have. So we'll notify them, but hey, from fire safety standpoint, they're good to go. But the other issue. We're pretty straightforward. We're very proactive. We don't get a lot of outside. Complaints, a lot of minor. That's why we're very proactive. Always. I'll be people after that.
Thank you very much. We have two more departments. We have the police department and we also have Public Works as well. And then we're going to do the Q&A and we'll do the breakout teams.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Podgorski. I'm the plan for Norwalk Police Department. I oversee our community police and services division. This is our table of organization for police department. Our chief police James Walsh reports directly to the board of police commissioners. We then have three assistant chiefs or deputy chiefs of police, deputy chief of administration, deputy chief of LaFleur, deputy chief of operations, deputy chief Terrence Blake, and deputy chief of community affairs, deputy chief Joe Dinho. For tonight, I'll focus mostly on some of the roles of the operations in our community affairs. It's a kind of correlate with quality of life issues I deal with. On our end, I'll talk about the patrol division and our special services division, our combined dispatch center, and our community police services division. Will just be kind of a general overview of how we receive complaints at the police department. Our combined dispatch center is staffed 24/7, depending on the time of day and night it is. It has either one or two supervisors assigned to the shift. We have one or two dispatchers assigned as police dispatchers. They handle all the police calls. And then we have one dispatcher assigned to fire and EMS, and usually one or two call takers. So complaints mostly come through our dispatch center. We also have a front desk officer. That position is staffed 24/7. That officer sits at the front desk and he gets complaints from the walk-in service, from people that come in and through phone calls. Complaints also come in through the chief's office, obviously, and our community police officers and our patrol division officers, when they're on patrol and dealing with community outreach events and meetings, they oftentimes get complaints and reports from people throughout the city that follow them. We also get complaints from City Hall customer service. Customer service basically forwards complaints down to us. They get forwarded to the dispatch supervisor desk. The dispatch supervisor will then draw a case number, assign a case number to it. And if the call necessitates an officer be dispatched to the scene right away, the dispatcher then sends an officer out to the location. If it's a case that requires more follow-up and it's not an immediate issue and it can be assigned to a division for follow-up, that the supervisor from that division is then notified. For anonymous tips, we use norwalkpd.com, the tip line, and tip 411. We get a lot of anonymous tips through those venues. Those tips come in, they come in to the supervisor desk and dispatch. Again, the dispatch supervisor assigns a case number to it. And they dispatch an officer to it. The reason the case number is assigned to it is just so there's a tracking and a record of when the case came in and what we did to address it. It's also then used for follow-up if the division follows up on the case if it necessitates follow-up. And just kind of a brief overview of what these three divisions do. And the reason I'm focusing on these three divisions is they're the ones that deal with mostly the quality of life issues that we're kind of talking about tonight. Well, the division officers obviously respond to calls for service, apprehend violators. They conduct preventative patrol, preliminary investigation of crimes. Or also some of the things the officers respond to are alarms, larceny complaints, disturbances, soliciting complaints, neighbor disputes, and traffic issues. For preventative patrols, we like to go out and inspect businesses, go talk to people, obviously drive around, pull patrols, apprehend violators. We do that through physical arrest, a misdemeanor summons, or a citation. Preliminary investigation of crimes. Our patrol officers will investigate crimes that are misdemeanor crimes. Anything that rises to a higher level of a misdemeanor or a felony offense, those will be followed up by our special victims unit, our detective bureau, and our special services division. Our special services division focuses on narcotics investigations, organized crime affecting neighborhoods, and liquor and smoke shop violations. So a lot of times those cases start with anonymous tips that are sent to the police department, and then the investigators follow up on those tips, sign informants, make drug purchases if necessary, secure search warrants, and then make arrests and seizures. They deal with liquor violations. In those instances, we'll send in underage cadets, purchase liquor violations and if to purchase liquor and if the liquor violation is confirmed, we then forward that case to the liquor commission to deal with the case. For smoke shops, we've been dealing with, illegal sale of marijuana. And so for those, we'll send an informant in, the informant will purchase marijuana, the investigators will then, secure search warrants, make arrests and seize the illegal goods. For illegal sale of nicotine to youth, again, we send an underage cadets to purchase nicotine. Community Police Services Division. So we follow up on issues that the patrol officers, when they're sent to, they can fix the issue that night, whether it be through enforcement or through action. We obviously hold community meetings and take part in community meetings throughout the city and kind of help address those issues. We also coordinate with city agencies. A lot of times our officers, cases that they are involved in, necessitate follow-up, and it's just, we found it better to have the same officer kind of addressing the issue so they know the issue, and they can follow up with the appropriate agency. And the traffic division, I write the traffic division on there because, so I oversee the traffic division, I just started in there, but I think that the traffic is a quality of life issue, whether it's speeding vehicles illegally parked, loud mufflers, so I include that in there. Some of the enforcement that we've done and continue to do for parking violations. Our goal is to educate, obviously, the public, enforce it, and gain voluntary compliance, which is obviously very difficult to do. So we do that through sending officers out there ticketing, but also contacting residents and posting things on our social media that we are enforcing in the police. I know it's silly, but it's important to obey, obviously, signs, and a lot of people don't. So just some of the fines that we issue, I'll just explain those real quick. So for a $60 fine, it's for parking on the wrong side of the street, on a sidewalk, double parking in a no parking zone, obstructing a bus stop, crosswalk, or a driveway within 25 feet of a stop sign, tow-away zone, obstructing traffic, or within 10 feet of a fire hydrant, within 25 feet of an intersection. Those are $60 fines. The $100 fines are parking in a handicap space or a commercial vehicle parked on the roadway. So for commercial vehicles, what we do is there's a 4-hour maximum for a commercial vehicle to be parked on the roadway. So an officer will go out there, will timestamp the call, draw a case number, and then 4 hours later, they will go back out there. And if the vehicle is still there, they will issue a citation. If the vehicle obviously leaves, they'll document it. For boat trailers, camper trailers, and recreational vehicles, all those vehicles are allowed to be parked on the roadway for a maximum of 12 hours. For abandoned vehicles. For abandoned vehicles are assigned to our dispatch center. If they're assigned to a patrol officers and community police officers, the officer goes out there, they try and make contact with the registered owner of the vehicle. If they're able to make contact with the registered owner of the vehicle, they has to be moved. Obviously, if it's deemed an abandoned vehicle, the vehicle is then stickered with an abandoned sticker and then sent to follow up to our abandoned motor vehicle unit, which is staffed by an officer and a supervisor. So that officer will investigate the vehicle, who owns the vehicle, will try and contact the owner again himself in a follow-up. If he's not able to do that, the vehicle is then towed from the road and a certified letter is sent to the owner of the vehicle, the lien holder, that they have 30 days to get the vehicle from the scrapyard or else it will be took. Obviously, sometimes that can be time consuming because of the amount of vehicles that come in and the amount of follow-ups that's necessary to get that vehicle. We deal with legal dumping, as was talked about before. So we issue a $219 fine. Basically, when an illegal dumping complaint comes in, the officer goes out, he, like was said, goes through the trash, and a lot of times what happens is someone leaves a piece of mail in the trash, but they look for surveillance footage, look through the trash, get the trash removed, and obviously follow up and try and issue a citation, which was most recently done from our end at King County Court. Someone on 3 separate occasions dropped trash, which we found who it was and were able to successfully take the person. Neighbor disputes, we respond to a lot of neighbor disputes. Most times, when those issues can't be solved or where they don't rise to a criminal nature, we then coordinate with the appropriate city agencies. When it is a criminal nature, our first goal isn't to necessarily punish a neighbor that's in the wrong. It's to kind of educate and mediate, because we think that in the long term, it's the best solution is for neighbors to get along and not just to enforce a $100 fine and then have to leave or more upset than they were beforehand. So our goal is to try to really get to the core of the issue. For motor vehicle violations, our motor vehicle complaints come in through dispatch, chief's office, and any kind of other mode. So motor vehicle stuff is assigned to our patrol officers. Patrol officers go out there, but we have traffic office, traffic division that's staffed with 4 officers and a supervisor. Those are the motorcycle officers you guys see out there. So we kind of assign those complaints based on the Yukon traffic study, complaints from the citizens. And we also use traffic data signs, which we go and post traffic signs on the post. And we get that data back to us, which shows that when most violations are occurring, the date and times that we need to post officers there. The other great part of we work with is traffic mobility and parking, we share that information with us. Noise complaints are, assigned on a needed basis when someone calls to complain, about noise that gets routed to our dispatch center, who then sends it to our patrol division. Unfortunately, because those are, sometimes we can be busy, those calls that sit in the stack for a little bit, as we like to say. But we do send the officers out to those cases. There's never a case where they just don't send an officer out for that. So officers, when they're sent the noise complaints, oftentimes it's neighbor complaints, we go to the location, draw a case number for it. We have to make contact with both parties, and we try and basically educate and enforce. And the first time that we go out there, it's usually a warning to the neighbor and ask them. And so, like I said before, information, our goal as a police department is to enforce law, deter crimes, and educate the public and gain voluntary compliance, which is difficult to do. And a lot of times when we have cases that don't rise to a criminal nature, people can call us. And so we go there and try and educate the public. If we can't solve the issue through enforcement, we do contact the other city agencies we work with. And try and follow up in that way the best we can. Thank you, everyone.
Right.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Wilbur Duran, permit engineer for DPW.
My name is Paul Sotnick. I'm senior civil engineer with the Department of Public Works.
So tonight, we are under engineering, under the DPW umbrella. Tonight, we're going to talk about some violations that DPW oversees. Mainly it's work without a permit, and DPW oversees the city right of way. And what that is, in many cases, it's the street and sidewalk area. So if there's any work happening there and there's no permit for that work, that would be a violation. Some work would include sanitary sewer repairs or connection. DPW also owns the sewer mains in the road. So if somebody's connecting to the sewer main without a permit, that would be a violation because there's usually a fee associated with that connection. Other types of activities that would be a violation are driveways. So if somebody's installing a new driveway, there's certain criteria that they need to meet our city standards. We want to make sure that new driveways are in compliance with their standards. So if there's any work without a permit for these driveways, that would be a violation. Trees fall.
Two things that I wanted to talk about, related to right of way. There's a lot of common misconceptions related to the right of way. The right of way is basically the area between property lines on both sides of the road. So you could have a line here and here for the properties, but the pavement in between is the actual road. And here in an old New England city like Norwalk, that pavement is not right down the center of the road right of way. Like if we were building a new road in Arizona today, the road pavement would be right down the middle of the right of way. Here in Norwalk, it varies all over the place. We have areas in Norwalk where the distance between the edge of pavement and the one side of the right of way is 30 feet. The road is all the way on one side, and other areas where it's 2 or 3 inches. So it's a common misconception that people think that the edge of their property is always 10 feet off the property line. That is not the case. And that brings us into the next category of the tree removals and tree planting. Anytime anybody does any work in the right of way where they would want to remove a city tree or on a city parcel of property, where they want to remove a city tree, they need a permit that's issued by the Department of Public Works. That also goes for planting within the city right of way on a city parcel too. And we just say the city of Norwalk is spending a lot of time and a lot of effort to try and regreen the city, increase the tree canopy coverage around the city. So we take that very seriously and we try everything we can do to work with the people so that they don't have to take the tree down. But there are times where it happens. And what we do now, in accordance with chapter 112, the city tree ordinances, when they do have to take it down with a permit, we will try to get them to do a replanting plan, or they would have to pay a fee that would go into a tree planting account that's been funded and organized by the new city tree ordinance, which is chapter 112, and that account goes specifically to plant trees around the city. One of the things that Wilbur was just talking about is with the driveways is sightlines. I want to talk about a couple of things. One of the things that we have violations of is related to sightline violations at intersections. We have what we call a 30-30 sightline triangle at an intersection. Because when people pull up, there's a stop sign. You want them to be able to see when they go to pull out. So in that 30-30 triangle, which we can talk about more at our table if people are interested in it, we want to make sure that nothing is over 2 feet high. And that is for the area within the city right away. And if that triangle crosses private property, it also applies to the private property too. Once again, for the safety of people pulling out at the intersections. The driveway sightline distance, we have the triangle. If you go from the center of the driveway, come back 10 feet, go over 30 at the gutter line or curb line, another 30, and those 3 points get connected to form what we call a 10-30-30 sightline triangle. And that, once again, nothing can be over 2 feet in that area. No fences. We'll have times where people will run fences right out to the edge of the road almost on one property, and they can't do that because they block the sightline triangle for the neighbor's driveway, which can lead to an accident. Another item that we often have issues, but we've got to make sure that they're constructed within the city right of way, is fences and walls. We want to make sure that they're not in the right of way. If they're on the right of way, we usually have people move them unless they're grandfathered in. But if they're going to cause, once again, a sightline triangle issue, we're going to make the people move those for safety reasons.
Yeah, another topic I want to touch on is, like Paul mentioned, the city's right of way can vary from street to street. So part of our efforts is identifying where that right of way actually is. So when we get complaints about things being in the right of way, like a fence, it's gonna be time dedicated to confirm whether or not it's in the right of way or not. So that's part of our process. Another type of violation that we get a lot is illegal discharge. And what that is whenever there is a pipe that is discharging water into the city's right of way, so the sidewalk or streets. Many times people see a lot of water in the sidewalk or the street, and they submit a request for illegal discharge. But sometimes it could be just groundwater. It could be that the water table is really high in the area, that the ground is very saturated. That is not a violation. That is not illegal discharge. We only focus on whenever we can confirm that there is a pipe that is sending water to the road, because that could cause issues, especially in the wintertime when temperatures get low, it could freeze and cause a tripping hazard. So that's something that we would address with the property.
Okay, another thing that we want to talk about is fill and excavation work. And you've heard Mr. Kleppen mention some of the grading issues and things like that related to planning and zoning. When someone is doing work on their property, and this is on private property, not in the right of way, if they're doing work, it's basically where they're gonna remove, so excavate, relocate on the property, even if it's a set amount that always was there before, but they're moving an amount, which I'm gonna talk about in a second, on the property. If they move it around, nothing new in, nothing new out, or the addition where they're filling and bringing material into the property, of 50 cubic yards of material, they would need a fill permit. There's a couple of exceptions to that. If they're doing work that's got a zoning and a building permit for a foundation, and they have a foundation permit, they can do grading related to the building and the foundation and work that's got to be done for that without a fill and excavation permit. the fill ordinance, chapter 97, applies to when there are no other permits in place and you have people going and leveling out a piece of property. They have a section where they want to just, create a new, flat area for a play area for, the people in the residents. And they want to, park in an area, whatever it might be, where they're going to take an area and they're going to fill it in. But then they would need to fill an excavation permit. And there are 8 triggers for that permit. It's not just 50 cubic yards. Another trigger is if it interferes with the drainage and subsurface or surface water of that lot or surrounding land. If it's gonna create aggravation of slope stability on their property or adjacent properties, or it's gonna create detrimental soil erosion either on their property or an adjacent property and sedimentation. If it creates any of those items, even if it's less than 50 cubic yards, they would still need to get a fill and excavation permit. And as Mr. Kleppen mentioned before too, the goal, and it's been a theme with several of the people that have come up and talked tonight, representatives of various departments. The goal is not necessarily just to find people, it's to try and bring them into compliance. And the fill ordinance is something where we've got to work with the people, we put them on notice, send them a notice of violation. We'll start with a door knocker on the door. Then we bring them in and sit them down, go through the ordinance, talk with them, let them know what they've got to do, a survey, where they've got to get a grading plan showing existing and proposed grading, and all of the work that's got to be done related to that. And if they make progress and we understand and we're compassionate about it, we understand it takes time to get a surveyor maybe to do the work. We work with them to try and bring them into compliance rather than just finding them. So it can take a while to go through the process, get the engineering drawings done, get the approval done, and then issue the permit. And then after that, we go out and make sure that they do the work that is actually approved on the plan. And then they have to submit an as-built drawing showing what was actually completed. So it's a multi-tiered process with the fill and excavation permits, but that's another area where DPW gets violations that we would have to work on. And it varies. There's times where we could have 1 fill permit a month. There's times right now where I think I have about 8 open cases where we're working on. It varies on a time of the year and when people decide that they're going to try and do work in their yards. And it's something where a lot of the residents aren't aware of that particular ordinance. So we try to make them aware. We put postings out on the Facebook and the city's website. So trying to educate the public about the ordinances, because ultimately the property owner is responsible for what gets done on their property.
One other violation I want to mention that isn't on here, but we get often is sidewalk repairs. So there's an ordinance in the city that requires the property owners to maintain their sidewalks. So when the sidewalk is in really bad shape to the point where it's a tripping hazard, that would be a violation on the homeowner to have to rectify that. And they would work with our department to make sure that that tripping hazard is taken care of. The next, I'm going to talk about some of the places where people can submit a request or a complaint about some violations. So they can go onto the website to submit a request directly, or they can contact our customer service department either through email or phone call to log in the complaint or request. Once the request is logged, our department will be notified. And at that point, we will do an investigation on the complaint. Many times we will go to the location itself to confirm whether or not it is a violation. And if it is a violation, we will leave a door notice for the property owner or potentially a tenant to contact us so that we can notify them what the violation is and how to rectify that. If that door notice doesn't result in a response, then we would follow up with a violation notice through the certified mail, requesting them to contact us. We'll give them a certain amount of days that they have to contact us to work towards rectifying the violation. If there's still no contact after that, then we will send a final notice letting them know that fines will be assessed at a certain date. And hopefully they get in touch with us by then. But if not, then we forward all the documentation and all the supportive information to the law department to begin the process of assessing those daily fines. Lastly, we just want to mention how to go about doing the work in the right of way correctly so that you make sure that all the work is done correctly and not in violation. So through that process will be through the DPW permits process. There's a different types of permits here that we issue, like the encroachment permit if you need to take space in the sidewalk or the street. Sewer permits if you need to do any sanitary sewer work, driveway permits, trees, and fill excavation permits. All the information can be found on our website under Public Works Engineering. And then if you have any questions at all about how to go through the permit process, you can contact us through email or phone number, and we will walk you through the process.
Final follow-ups, and it's been a common theme from all of the departments too. We are in constant contact with the various departments, talking between planning and zoning for some of the public works stuff, for fill permits, conservation commission and officer Alexis Caracetti, Chief Ireland. We're in contact all the time. We have to check to make sure that there aren't permits in place for some things, so we know whether to act on the fill ordinance. And then in other areas too, we need signatures and sign-offs in coordination with planning and zoning, and Tammy Maldonado for the fill permit through planning and zoning that's in conjunction with the fill and excavation from Public Works. So we are in constant contact with the various departments. We always try to talk to each other, and we're not in separate silos. We all work together as a team.
Thanks, everyone. Well, part one is done. So, thank you so much for your patience. You know, we really, this is what we do every day at City Hall, right? And so, well, sometimes it feels like maybe there are things that aren't happening. There are a lot of things happening on our end, and we're trying to be able to manage not only bringing in new permits and helping new development, but also then trying to figure out how to oversee those violations in a meaningful way, while gaining compliance. And I think from the examples you've heard, you know, what makes this work particularly interesting and particularly challenging is that each case is incredibly different than the next one that we see. It could be a different owner, a different issue, a different underlying challenge. And it's our responsibility as city staff to be responsive to the complaints that you make, but also to be compassionate to the homeowner and try to offer them as many ways to come into compliance as possible. So thanks for all of the team members for presenting tonight. The second section is the Q&A, and the third obviously is the open house portion. So we're at about 7:40 now. I think we'll give about 20 minutes for questions. And again, just as a reminder, we're really asking to not sort of put properties on the table or put names on the table, but we really want to focus this section on process-based questions where if you're confused about how to make a complaint, if you're confused about the timing of why you may not see something happening instantly when you make a complaint, something along those lines, you're going to have an opportunity to talk more specifically about a property or something that is bothering you when we do the open houses at those tables. So I'll open up the Q&A. If you could come up and say your name and your address and ask your question, then the proper person at the table will answer. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mallory Moyer. I live at 22 New Canaan Court. Thank you for putting this on tonight. I'm finding everything incredibly helpful and educational. You had mentioned on average 40 complaints a month. Is that 40 residents complaining or 40 properties about which there's been a complaint? 40. Okay. When an issue affects all of you, when it has a zoning, a blight, a health, a noise complaint, how would a resident go about most effectively communicating that to the city? Would you say we should tailor a complaint? You know, we submit one to planning and zoning, and then we submit another to blight and sort of make sure that everybody knows each of the little components of it?
Yeah, so I think So we're always working with one another, even on a daily basis,
Yeah.
and we're doing, actually, we take a neighborhood each month, and there are 3 or 4 of us that get in a car and actually drive the neighborhood to proactively identify some of these things. So I think if you use the click and request, even to put one violation in and just say, I've noticed that there's a number of violations on the property, and if, the teams could go out and inspect, then I think that would be perfectly fine.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Is that something within your regular meetings? That was wonderful to hear that
Yeah.
just the communication's ongoing. Is there something, I know you mentioned like fire takes priority always. But safety of human beings will take priority. Are there other priority levels? Like I know in planning and zoning, there are, priority and then sort of next down the list. Are there, as people here who are educating themselves or submitting requests, what are the priority ones? Or is that more as you all discuss them, you figure that?
Yeah, so I would say, so there's a few thoughts on that. I think the health and safety, regardless of what it is always the most important. So is the porch falling down? Is the window covered with cardboard? Is the door coming out? Those are kinds of health and safety things that we're talking about. We've had complaints about holes in roofs. We've had complaints about animals burrowing on the side of the garage and taking it down. So there are these structural things that are sort of, that are also health and safety related. A lot of the things that we talk about when we meet are when there's one property in particular that may have violations from 4 or 5 different departments, and we need legal to help us navigate sort of what that means, right? Because it could be that we've had several complaints about the same property, that we've been trying to work with the property owner for a number of months, that we don't seem to be gaining compliance, and we're trying to figure out how to make that happen. I think that it's an interesting question because we've always prioritized the health and safety piece, but we've always had one zoning enforcement officer and one blight enforcement officer. And as a matter of fact, thank you for all of your support and being able to help us get more staff, because as of 3 years ago, we only had 2 part-time blight inspector people. So, we're slowly coming. But now we have the ability to not only deal with the complaints, but also do the proactive work as well. And so it's an extension of answering your question, but the priority is, I think, the health and safety piece. And if we see something out there, then we definitely just pick up the phone and call, because that's really what the main goal is, trying to make sure that everybody's okay up there.
And then lastly, in terms of using the app, the click and request.
Yep.
And more broadly, understanding that Connecticut sets the time limits, or the how many days a homeowner will have to respond. So I think all of us in here just kind of went, "Ugh, okay, we can't speed that up." How is our follow-up most effective, if at all?
Yeah. So follow-up is very effective. And unfortunately for the residents, it's not as accessible today as we think it should be, and that we're trying to get it there. So a lot of times we get emails that say, hey, I made a complaint about a particular address. Can you please tell me where it is in the process? A lot of times people will email the mayor's office, and the mayor will email and say, Jess, can you please give me an update? Or Steve, can you give me an update? And we're happy to do that. And a lot of times what that looks like is us sending emails around to one another, making sure we have every department's update so that we know how to give a succinct and holistic answer on that. Right now, the best way to follow up is really to reach out to the departments and figure that out. Steve had mentioned that we're bringing online permitting and licensing software on board, which will also help us do blight and zoning violations. And that will allow property owners, regardless of who they are in the city of Norwalk, to be able to go on and actually see who has violations and where they are in the process. But we're hoping, I can't promise this because it's sort of this is what I'm hoping for, but it'd be really nice for the complainant to be able to receive an automated email that says, hey, we got your complaint at 7:36 on Friday evening, and it's in process, and then, hey, just to let you know, the 15 days have passed that we gave the notice of violation. And so we just wanted to let you know that we're still working on this and that it's still going through the process. And so, it'd be nice to not only give the automated notification, but also then a follow-up, at each step, so that you don't have to proactively call and know what's going, to know what's going on.
Bother you all more. It sounds like there's a lot to do and not enough people to do it. Thank you.
So, just before you, if anybody's, virtual, you can use the raise your hand function and we'll take, people via Zoom as well. There's also cookies and water in the back that Ian went out and bought, so you'll eat them if you don't.
Please eat them.
Hi, my name is Sarah Flade. I am an owner at the Riverway condominiums. My question is, what is the scope of the operations for the Norwalk River, and does the air and water quality get checked regularly, and how much? And then I have a second question, but
Can you just repeat the first part again? You know,
so the scope of operation of the Norwalk River. So how often does the land, the air quality, the water quality get checked?
that's a really encompassing question. So there's other folks that aren't here tonight that also have jurisdiction with the river, which would be
Okay,
Harbor Management Commission.
okay.
You know, police as well have in fire marshals.
You might know from the water quality, right?
Right, we don't do sampling there. That's,
But the beaches, but not the river beaches?
well, no.
Okay. Okay, I live right by the rowing club right there. So,
Yeah, there are other groups that are not necessarily affiliated with the city that do different kinds of water testing, like for dissolved oxygen and things like that. You have
okay.
Things with the Shellfish Commission, Harbor Watch also.
Yeah, Harbor watches.
And who actually owns the river? Is it the city of Norwalk? Because if one owner along the river makes a decision that impacts many different owners along the river, is there going to be a voting system for us to speak up?
So that we can see, folks online. So, the ownership of the river. So we have a harbor management commission, and the commission oversees, the operation of the harbor and the policies in which the operations happen, as well as the fee structure. They do that through the harbor management plan, and that's approved through DEEP. So DEEP has to, provide approval of the harbor management plan. And then the Harbor Management Commission is the group that actually approves different projects. They don't approve projects, but we refer projects to them to ensure that's in line with the harbor management plan. The harbor management plan, is something that is looked at, regularly and updated regularly. And so as far as the management of the actual harbor itself, that is, city managed. Is anyone from DEEP? No one from DEEP is here today.
I
No.
would just like to see stats from like from 2020 to 2024.
Mhm.
Divine Rose, not to name names, but the air quality for head of the harbor versus the air quality at this head of the river.
Right. No, I
That
think,
would be great to find out.
yeah, it's a great point, and it's, I'm sure that we are able to have that we don't have that information right now, but if you connect with Steve afterwards, or even Bill Mooney afterwards, or whoever it happens to be, then we can exchange information and we can follow up with you, and then we can also post it on the site as part of the presentation, just as a follow-up to the questions that we are not able to answer tonight.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Good evening, y'all. My name is Diane Loricella. I'm at 21 Little Fox Lane. Thanks for having this. I remember asking for it when the mayor used to have his evening listening sessions, so I'm glad that this is a great idea, and I think there should be more of them. And I appreciate all of you. Doing enforcement is not easy. I was once an enforcement investigator with the state DEP, and it's not easy, but working together is important. You had asked about process questions and process suggestions. I'll be brief. Because I still do investigations for clients and citizens, I would like to see the need and coordination for a better paper trail system of evidence and pictures in the files, so that when those of us, like myself, I do environmental site assessments, often I don't see much in files that I know there's long time history of problems. And I know there's a lot of things in the archive, but we want to help you as well with photos, videos. We want to make sure the public wants to know what you need so that you could nail your case, because it's all about the evidence, right? In many cases. And training the public what to look for better. So I would like to know if this particular, the slideshow could be placed on the homepage of the city's website. many of us in the audience know, the city's website needs improvement. This would be a great thing with a big bubble, so we can actually get to it without having to click through 4 or 5 times. Going back to what we just talked about on contractor yards, and I just have 3 rapid fire questions and then I'll stop. Okay, contractor yards. It's been my experience for the illegal ones that it seems like the city tries to help the owner of that illegal contractor yard cure it instead of closing it down and shutting it down and getting rid of it. And I have a lot of clients in South Norwalk where it seems like the contractor yards are rewarded. So that's one question, is why does it seem like we're curing that type of illegal activity? Under noise, do you have duplicate meters both in the police department, which is charged with the ordinance of noise enforcement? Now we've added, because we just amended the noise ordinance, I worked on it with council for 5 years. Does the health department also have duplicate noise meters so that when one is broken, the other one can be used? And do you arrive at a complaint with your meter, or do you just use your ears, which are not metered? And lastly, for dust and odor control, are you, a lot of you have told me, well, we wait for this state to come down. The state is even, there are fewer people there and they're in Hartford. So what kind of plans do you have to add help when we have odor and dust, which are huge health problems? Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dan. So I can answer a few of those, but not all of them. But the first thing I want to comment on is that Bill made it pretty clear that we can only look at what we see from the sidewalk and what we see from the road, right? So I really encourage you as residents who care about the community not to go on other people's property or put your phone over someone else's fence or try to collect evidence on your own, right? So if you think that there's a concern or you think that there is an issue, then you really need to use click and request to come to us so that we have the ability to do that. If you're collecting evidence and you're giving it to us and it's not collected in a way that that we can use, then it's sort of, it may embolden the property owner and may actually not help our case at all, right? It may violate some of the statutes that are in place from the state level. So I really want to encourage everyone to be safe and be careful of, to stay off of other folks' properties, even if you feel like there's really egregious things going on. Sort of, it's just best to call it in. So I'm just going to comment on that. The second is that, it may feel like we're helping different folks achieve different things in the city. And, when it comes to illegal contractor yards, I think that's probably the one group that we're not trying to help. But what I want to say is that we have tools that we are able to use to be able to indicate to people that what their behavior is not welcome in the city, right? And so one of the reasons why we've mentioned so many times, one of the things that we work with the legislators on is that blight fines are looked at as the same as property tax. So that's why if you have a blight fine or a lien on the house or the property that's blight, it can go on the tax sale. That's not true of a zoning violation. So we have a lot of illegal contractor yards that may have $10,000 or $20,000 or different amounts of fines that are on those properties. And the most that we've ever been able to do is put a lien on the property so that when they sell, we would get that fine paid or the lien would be cleared and they would move along and the next user is not able to have that property be in place. Now, the reason why we've mentioned a few times talking with legislators is because for the first time ever, in one of the bills that got passed by the House and the Senate, there's language in there that actually says that the state is to treat zoning violations the same as property tax, which would then allow us to push those properties onto the tax sale, which is actually a huge tool. It really is the only tool that we have to be able to clear the fines or have the property owner come into compliance. And we've never had that tool before. And so it's just as frustrating for us, I think, and we don't live, we don't necessarily live beside it and we don't necessarily see it every day, but we understand that it's been on the books and that we've been reaching out and that we're watching the fine amount increase every day. And without the tool to be able to actually move it off the books, we have to keep dealing with the property owner to be able to get there. So one of the things that we have talked about is going out and meeting with property owners and meeting with different contractor yards to be able to ensure that they know what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing, whether they're illegal or legal. But I'm optimistic because I feel as though finally municipalities in the state of Connecticut and not just Norwalk actually have this tool to be able to force these property owners to be able to do something instead of just a lien that's on a property for when they may sell in 20 or 25 years. I think, Steve, do you want to take the dust question?
Yeah, I can, and I'm in my best. With the contracting yard, earlier is that they are required to cover piles. Have height limitations on piles, obviously, when they're working on that pile actively, that's the root time, when they're loading material, that's when you most likely get the dust. But they are supposed to be taking preventive measures at that stage, but whatever they can do to get the dust. But our regulations would be a little different in terms of how we do that. Enforcement with that as opposed to the health department, which I think, because it's more, I think they would approach it more from like it's an acute issue versus ours would be their violating an action.
So I'll just add, we frequently get those dust complaints and we get odor complaints and we do go out and respond. And many times our team will go out there and we'll talk to the folks and talk about the prevention measures and let them know that they have to be in place. Same thing with odor. We commonly do those investigations. And Bill, can you talk a little bit more about some of the work over the summer that your team has been doing to go and frequently check places, throughout the summer?
Sure. So we've had a one particular odor complaint, and we've been working on it. We've been spending many days going out and the owner that the complainant has been very appreciative that we've been doing it. We probably looked over the course of a year trying to get the odor, and he would say, well, you can only get a whiff. We'd go out days and days and days and not smell anything. We don't have any equipment. So we're just using our sense of smell. So we worked on that for a long time. We finally went out and got a whiff of it, and we're pursuing it now. The thing is, though, is that in some cases, certain types of ventilation are licensed and permitted by other agencies, like DEEP, for instance. In this particular case, I put out a pretty strong call to DEEP that I want somebody to come down and help me with this particular issue about addressing this one thing. So we do work on those things. Regarding the dust, we do the same thing. When we get a complaint, we try and go out. If it's something where it's a dust pile of dirt, we say, look, you either got to let it down or you got to cover it. If it's a construction area, we'll go by and we'll talk to whoever. Usually it's down on Meadow Street. We worked on getting them to do some wetting down there. I think last year we had Diana. She was with the Common Council. She actually got, I think, DPW to do some street sweeping down there to minimize that. So we try and work on those things as they come up. Regarding your noise question, we only have one unit and we always go out with the unit. We don't go out and just listen to it. If somebody complains, we go out to the proper land, we follow the proper protocols to assess whether it violates the noise ordinance given that time of day.
In the police department is, we have 2 units that we use. They're both readily available. But supervisors have access to, we do not bring those on every complaint. So there are those complaints where it's based on a need and necessity. A lot of those complaints that the officers go on to without that, and specific cases where they come back in and grab that.
Thank you. Thank you. Lisa Henderson, Apple Tree Lane. Thank you for your overview on the workings of the city tonight. I was hoping that there would be more discussion on how to better streamline the process of blight and zoning violations. We've heard that there are stacks of violations not being addressed due to time constraints and lack of employees. So I really want to know, how long does it take from complaint on the city website, to somebody going out and assessing the issue, to a letter, to zoning citation hearings. I've reported issues and it's over 10 months. And these are major issues and nothing has happened. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that you've heard a lot from the team about the time period that it takes, and Bill Mooney mentioned that it's taken even 3 or 4 months to be able to actually get certified mail to the actual property owner. These are not rules that we make up at the local level. These are rules that we have to abide by, that are state statute, that require us to meet certain gate points to be able to make that happen. I think that you've heard me talk about how we had a part-time person and now we have a full-time person, and then now we have 2 full-time people just even for blight enforcement. And so, I think that the feedback is working, right? We know that there is a backlog. We know that this is important to people. We know that we need to get out there and be proactive about what we're doing. And I think that, we can see that through the hires, but you can see that hopefully with tonight in us being able to come to you and tell you the things that we're doing and how we're doing it. Each case is very specific. And I think that you saw one timeline from Steve Kleppen, you saw a second timeline from Bill Ireland, you saw a third timeline from Bill Mooney. And all of those departments are working on the same properties. So you can imagine how complicated it gets when all of the time periods for all of those particular departments and state statutes are completely different, and yet they all are the same property in which we're dealing with. So there's not a specific answer of how long it takes. I think that we can give an estimate of basically when we get a complaint in, we try to turn it around within a week and go and inspect the issue. If it's something that's a health and safety issue, then we'll go and inspect it, as Bill Mooney said, within that day. And we know it's frustrating. I'm not trying to stand up here and say that we inspect that day as soon as we get the call, and that, I think that what we're trying to say is that we have a greater ability now than we ever did before to be proactive and being able to be responsive to the community. And we're thinking of not only ways to do that on the ground with inspections, but also ways to do that through automated systems and through software. And so I don't know if anyone else on the panel wants to add to any of that, but it looks like Bill has something to say.
What we have also with the hearing officer, we have these meetings. If he sees any type of improvement taking place or cleanup, if it's blight, I don't know the property and I don't know if it's considered blight or not. He'll keep extending the time to the individual to clean it up because they're trying the best they can. And the attitude is that they're trying and hopefully coming into compliance with what we're looking for. So we get to a certain point where we have really no say anymore in the matter, except to keep bringing it up. And hopefully he changes his mind and says, okay, enough's enough. Yes. Pardon? He won't go to the citation officers here where they have the hearing. And the evidence is put in front of him. I'll get, if I don't hear. The evidence is put in front of him, and the photos we have to have, and this is, I think Diane Larcello was mentioning photos. I had it happen to me the very first time this all started, 2014. I was all happy, had all these photos a neighbor took for me. And I went to court, and the first question out of the judge's mouth, did you take these photos? And I said, no. And the thing was all dismissed, and we had to start all over again. But getting to what you're talking about, if they show that they're trying an improvement, and I don't know what property you're talking about, because it might not be blight, it could be blight in your eyes, but not in the law, he will grant extensions. We've had an extension go to that one house we had in West Norwalk. It took me 2 years to finally get it down. So we try our best, but it's all in his hands, because he is the judge in our case. Okay?
Yeah, I would say too, that picking up on what Jess said, we try to at least get out and look within a week at what it is, and then assess what whether it's a violation or not. As I indicated on my slides, we prioritize certain things. So if sometimes parking in the front setback may be a nuisance for some folks, it's not a life safety issue. It's something, okay, we understand there's a violation here, needs to get addressed, but within the confines of what we can handle for volume, I don't prioritize them. So if I get something that I know I have somebody doing auto body worker fixing cars, and he's got 3 cars in the front yard with the hoods up, and it looks like there's a full mechanic shop there, then that's something we jump on right away and expedite as quickly as.
And it is also one of those situations where, we go out and someone's, out of the goodness of their heart is fixing their family's cars that weekend, right? And then we go back the next weekend. Well, their friends needs their brakes changed and so, that we try to give the benefit of the doubt and then we'll go back and we'll go back and we'll go back, but we need your help, right? I mean, we need everyone's help in being able to put a complaint in and being able to use click and request to be able to help us understand what's going on. When we go out with the team and we do different neighborhoods, we see different violations and we keep a list and we come back and we give them to the teams. But I'm sure that when everyone is driving wherever they're driving, they're also seeing challenges out there, right? So definitely I think working together is the best way. I think at this point, we're gonna, I'm sorry, excuse me. I'm so sorry.
I can hear.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Forever. Part of the state. I mean, it can expire. It sits for 9 years, it just disappears. Yeah.
And that's new, right? That's over that was 2 years ago. I think that got put in. Yeah.
The permit could just sit there, expire. Considered Public Act 17 where nothing can be done to the house. The way it is, we don't against zoning and I think public works and everybody else. The city agency can go out against that property, even if it's not compliant. The only problem is, you start to see now, when people selling it, we're getting homeowners insurance. The sales fall through and people trying to think. But technically, there's nothing we.
No, but no, I mean, and that's a common problem. And we do see that with certain contractors too, from time to time as well. They'll basically use a property as a yard for them. So they'll go from project to project and bring all their equipment with them, whether they use that equipment on site or not. If they have an open permit and they're using that equipment in association with that permit, then they can keep that. But there are definitely times when folks take advantage of that and then just park stuff there because they have nowhere else to put it. At that point, then we may try to do enforcement action on them to get them to remove that equipment.
So at this point, we're gonna do the open house and the staff are gonna move to the tables at the back. Please help yourself to water and cookies and thank you so much for coming. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it.